Okay. All right, Noel. Episode 36 in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Noel Casler podcast. I'm back here with my main man, Jumpin' Jimmy Kennedy. He's got his tie-dye shirt on. He's all ready for the weekend. Mom went away, and Jimmy gonna play, right?
Absolutely. House to myself for the weekend. So who knows what's in store for LLJK, you know?
Oh, shit.
We'll keep it wide open. We'll see.
Keep it PG, brother.
That's right. We'll keep it PG for now. But you went to a show last night. Pretty exciting, huh?
Yeah, I went to see my friend Zebra, which was a killer band that I was really into in the early 80s and mid 80s, and kind of cut my teeth going to their shows in the Hudson Valley and taking photographs of them playing. It's where I developed my interest in rock photography, which, if people don't know, if you ever do a deep dive on my Instagram, it'll blow your mind. Just scroll through the last few years that I've been doing comedy, and you'll be like, oh my God. Because I took a lot of pics at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and, you know, various events, and I'm friends with Danny Clinch and Kevin Mazur and a lot of the leading guys. So I would always jump in there in the pit and take my own photographs. But anyway, so let's get into it, Jimmy. It's been a crazy week. I just announced another show, by the way. Really? Guess where I'm playing, Jimmy?
I'm gonna guess Boston this time.
Oh, your name's Kennedy, so that was a good good. I'm going to your ancestral grounds to do a show in Boston on December 26th.
Okay.
I just announced it. It's the day, it's the day before what do you call it? Christmas Eve. You can tell I'm a good Christian, can't you, Jimmy? I'm really up on stuff.
Yeah.
The day before Christmas Eve is a Thursday. So Thursday, December 23rd at 6 and 9 p.m. I'm going to be at City Winery, Boston, in their beautiful Haymarket Lounge. So you can come on out, have some food, have a couple drinks, and we'll kick off the Christmas season with your boy Noel. I'm going to be called Noel until then. I bought some umlauts on Amazon, and I'm changing this class and this name up. So come out and celebrate Christmas. Obviously, in 2 weeks from last night, I'm going to be at the Wall Street Theater in Norwalk, Connecticut. That show is going to be lit. Going to be a nice, beautiful theater show. So come on out, and then I'll be in New York City at the end of January. But let's get into this week. We tape this show on a Friday, and we recap the week's events. But I gotta start with Aaron Rodgers, because it's, I'm so tired of my Twitter feed being sort of dictated by Joe Rogan's medical advice. Like it's an obvious extension of MAGA and stuff, that there's this sort of bro culture of thinking like, they sort of sound quasi-intelligent, and speak like they've done some research on issues. And, it ties in with this whole libertarian kind of, mentality that seems to be so prevalent, your Barstool Sports kind of Howard Stern kind of, that kind of just dumb bro culture, is like, has influenced legions of people. And of course, I'm talking about Aaron Rodgers, and this breaking news that he went on some guy's interview show, I think the Barstool Sports guy, and started talking about, well, I did my own research and I talked to my good friend Joe Rogan, and he recommended I take ivermectin. It's like, dude, you're the human equivalent of a thoroughbred horse. So first of all, how did the Green Bay doctors not get wind of this? The many millions of dollars you pay for your, star player, your quarterback, right? How are there not like 10 doctors completely monitoring him and, not telling him what to do, but like filling his ear better than Joe Rogan is, concerning basically the major health issue of our lifetimes, besides the daily grind and disaster of cancer and all these other medical issues. This sort of flare up of this pandemic is the sort of health thing that you're facing, and it's health and society. And the guy performs in public arenas, with a bunch of other dudes standing right in front of him, when he yells, hut one, hut two. Like, how are you going to be that guy knowing he was just spitting COVID molecules on you for the last 6 weeks? It's shameful, because he's getting paid more than anybody on the team, I assume, or within the top few players. And as you know, and not everybody gets paid the same amount of money, and the dudes that put their bodies on the line get paid the least. The dudes in the trenches on the, offensive line. And, like, it's just, it's remarkable to me that somebody would jeopardize such a lucky vantage point in life in such a privileged position, making all that money, playing a goddamn game for a living that most people have to give up when it's time to, put on big boy pants and go into the work world. They put on tights, and go run out on a field every Sunday with a bunch of cheerleaders and a bunch of dudes drinking beer, cheering them on like they're gladiator gods. That's got to be a fun gig compared to what most people have to do. So why wouldn't you do the very least to protect your fellow workers, protect your industry, your league, and be aware of what we're facing as a nation, where we're gingerly crawling out of this thing, and guys like Joe Rogan were playing arenas at the height of the Delta flare-up, with Dave Chappelle, the same sort of mentality of like, I hate woke culture. Don't censor me. No, there's reasons you have parameters in a society. It's to keep things in check, like the spread of infectious diseases, so to have somebody who's thought of as a hero, and it is obviously a great athlete. I mean, I got pictures of them I took on the field when they won the Super Bowl, but it's just, it shows you how pervasive the ignorance is and how it is metastasized into so much of our mostly white male, and female culture. It's the same kind of people that put that Virginia guy, as governor on Tuesday as are listening to this, and don't realize how stupid they sound. When you're saying like, I have access to probably the best doctors in the world, I have the best health insurance, I got more money than God, and I'm going to call up Joe Rogan, and ask him for medical advice on something that he's been talking to Alex Jones about and a bunch of dudes from the Comedy Store for the last year. Like, no, like you don't do that.
Well, and the guy that interviewed him, Pat McAfee, before he landed this job at SiriusXM, he was with Barstool Sports, started a Indianapolis chapter, for Barstool Sports here, and it eventually turned into the gig that he has now. But it's for a quarterback, especially, that's a position of leadership. When you go onto the field, you're the guy leading that squad, that side of the ball onto the field, and you can't even take a basic vaccine. And, I grew up watching Peyton Manning, a guy who single-handedly could change the outcome if he didn't play on a given Sunday. Not only are you subjecting the team to a possible loss, but playoff business, like bars around Green Bay that are dependent on Aaron Rodgers to play and perform well so that the Packers win, those guys are losing out on money too, because Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to take a damn vaccine. So for all the Republicans that are worried about small business, the guy that's going to bring in a lot of folks to those bars doesn't want to take a vaccine so that you guys can make money. Yeah. So how much does Aaron Rodgers really care about Green Bay?
Well, think about it in terms of this, Jimmy. Green Bay is owned by the fans, right? It's the one franchise where all these fans have a stake in the ownership, right? Which is a wonderful thing that we've always applauded. He's spit in the face of that because he's jeopardizing that whole franchise, the rest of their season. It's the middle of the season. He's not respecting that. And like you said, there's that economic, fallout that's going to hit a small town, like Green Bay. It's a small place. And it's also all they have. There's other cities where like you don't even notice you have a couple football teams. A New York team could disappear and nobody would really care. Right. But like we'll go on. There's other things to do is my point. There's nothing else to do in Green Bay. They'll go watch a football game in 3 feet of snow and 10 below weather because it's all they have to do. It's either that or sit at home and eat kielbasa. Right? That's all they do, right? Cheese curds and stuff. I'm just kidding. Wisconsin's an awesome state, but my point is it should mean even more to you because we've always held up your team and city as an embodiment of what football stands for. This working man's just get up in the cold weather and, play outside and be a man and shut up and be a teammate. whoever their famous coach is. Like
It's Lombardi.
Yeah, exactly. It's the fucking, his name's on the trophy that they give you, you know? So you're spitting in the face of all that. You know, if you told a factory worker, you know, in the height of sort of industrial America in the 50s, like, you're going to have to take a shot today to continue to get to go to your factory and put food on your kids' table and help them make a better life, all of them would do it. Okay. They all just got back from doing a lot worse in World War II, you know, storming beaches where they knew they were going to die, you know, like, and maybe the 10th guy behind them might get up the cliff, you know. We're not showing the bravery and mettle that has defined so much of what American masculine culture always portended to be and dressed up in uniforms to be. You know, football's a metaphor for battle, right? It's a game where dudes are essentially trying to kill each other without really killing each other, right? But like, that's what it's there for. It evokes, you know, it's not a graceful situation, it's brutality, right? It's physical brutality, and that gets a lot of visceral enjoyment out of the audience, and it's got its healthy, you know, it's not all bad is what I'm saying. You know, obviously the NFL's bad and they covered up what that does to the human body and brain more specifically, but it's a business. That's not the only business that knows its product will kill you. Like, money's more important. You know, Joe Manchin's driving around in a Maserati, heading out on 2 weeks vacation today. He doesn't care. His job was to stop that legislation, to drag it out, right? Kristen Sinema dragged it out. They had to drag it out through the November election. And now Mitch and those guys are going to just obfuscate everything until the midterms. And yeah, they'll still get it passed. But my point is, it should have been passed 3 weeks ago, a month ago. And then there would have been something to campaign on in Virginia. But that's what it is. And I'm trying to like show how that's all tied in. You know, our biggest problem in America right now is ignorance and sort of this tribalistic, like, my team, their team. You know, he's clearly also saying, Aaron Rodgers, what team he's on, right? Because I read the transcript of the interview, and it's all about, well, the Johnson & Johnson's vaccine sucked, and who are they to tell me what I can do with my body? And I'm worried about sterility. What are you worried about? You already dated Olivia Munn, and you didn't have a kid with her. You know what I mean? It's all downhill from now anyway. Like, that's a joke. She's beautiful. Yeah. That's my point. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you really want to have kids that bad. You blew that one. John Mulaney beat you to that punch. He's having a baby with her, you know?
Well, and he dated Danica Patrick for a while, dude. She's not the nicest person. And in my experience, having talked with people who have dealt with her at the Indy 500, you know, I don't know. It's up to Aaron. Who am I to judge on who Aaron dates? You know, but
well, he's gonna be dating Tommy Lauren next, because he just limited his thing. You know, and I don't want to get him in the gossip. I don't know anything about the guy, but I remember on The Bachelor, his brother was on The Bachelor, and like, Aaron's estranged from the whole rest of the family. He doesn't talk to his parents and his brother. He doesn't go back to his hometown in California, which, when I heard about that, I'm like, that's really odd. You know, like, you're not having your family there and you're winning championships and Super Bowls. Like, you're that estranged from your core family. And look, I haven't talked to my dad in 20 years or 15 years or something. You know, that can happen. I got large chunks of family that I don't know that well, but the impression I got is that, like, Aaron was the common factor, you know, in whatever that split is. And I'm just saying, that's sort of a red flag. Like, you got some kind of oppositional defiance or unhealed trauma in you. And that's what this stuff appeals to. You know, that's what MAGA-ism is. It's a way to be a punk. It's a way to be an asshole publicly. That's what Let's Go Brandon is all about. You know, it's having an inside joke with other people and getting to be disruptive and getting away with it. And now it's branded. You know, it's on the, you know, the shitty dress that, like, Lauren Boebert wears to the, you know, Matt Schlapp cocktail party, like, you know, CPAC prom or whatever the hell that was last night. I don't know if you saw that picture, Jimmy. Like, what are they doing in tuxes? You know, like, what are they doing celebrating? Well, I'll tell you what they're doing, Jimmy. They're celebrating the fact that they're basically winning. You know, they've made enough noise and bought enough time now that they're going to get away with stuff. You're going to have 30 Lauren Boeberts come the midterms. You know, you're going to have a Ron DeSantis or somebody making a serious play for the White House. It may not be Trump again, but it'll have Trump's little handprint all over it.
I'm going to be crying in Indianapolis in about a year with with the results that are going to be coming out. But yeah, man, like I saw DeSantis at one of his press conferences, and he referenced the Brandon thing. A guy tweeted me last night with the Thursday night football game between the Colts and Jets. Speaking of New York teams, they had a "Let's Go Brandon" chant going up in the rafters of Section 400 at Lucas Oil Stadium. I used to think that sports was one of the few things that united people, but it's become this "Let's Go Brandon" thing has permeated into sports now. The one thing that kind of would bring people together regardless of political ideology. So that's kind of disappointing.
Yeah, and you're going to hear that. You'll hear that chant at the Super Bowl. I guarantee you, dude. That chant is here to stay. You're just at the beginning of that. There's a crazy person who walks around a town near me every weekend with a dog that's not on a leash, and he's like the town crazy guy. I don't mean mental illness, just like probably some drunk who lives in his mom's basement kind of deal. And he goes, "Let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon," and he acts like the dog is named Brandon. That's his big joke. But he does the flap and calls the dog and walks up and down the street, like disturbing the peace in front of children and stuff in a very quintessential New England, beautiful town. And, he's doing it because he's unleashed, and the cops, the fire department there is full on Trump people. They hang their posters and their blue flags and all that crap everywhere. So, the authorities will wink at this stuff too. That's why the cops are on Aaron Rodgers' side, right? The cops ain't getting vaxxed either. Right. The same thing, this machismo kind of America, the sons of sort of not too distant immigrants for the most part. That's a lot of the people that filled up the suburbs, as I say every week, the white flight, your Irish and your Italian Americans and your Catholics and everybody who sort of came up to be mildly racist in the suburbs. Right. Because you're talking nice and you're around other, people and Joey's a good guy. He's a cop. He works hard. He takes care of his family, right? But when Joey goes to the city, he treats black families and black people a lot different, right? And people didn't want to acknowledge that, right? That same constituency that didn't understand Black Lives Matter is completely susceptible to critical race theory. So all you have to do is give them a dog whistle. Right. So they're fighting against something. So they'll allow the nuisance factor of the guy walking up and down the street with his dog chanting, "Let's go, Brandon." Do you know what I'm saying? They'll use this sort of like disruptive bullying mentality to their advantage. And, as we know, the Republicans have no shame. So they're just doing it all the time. And the Democrats, they all want to be the executive producer of Punk'd rather than journalists these days, right? They want to do their own version of that, which is not helpful. It might get you a lot of clicks and get you famous and get you mentioned on nightly news shows, but it's not really where we should be at. You shouldn't be pretending to be somebody else and interviewing a politician. Everything shouldn't be this hidden camera gotcha kind of punked bullshit. That stuff never interested me from Borat on. I know Borat's brilliant. It makes me uncomfortable because the whole discourse gets to who pulled off the latest stunt and got more clicks. And now that person gets to gin up more emotion in people. And that's what is driving elections now is anger and fear and rage and all this. That's not what it's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about empathy, compromise, and figuring out how to have a balanced society, right? And we've lost that in both extremes, and I'm as liberal and progressive as it gets. I'm not saying that we need pushback against that. In actuality, I'm saying you need to follow the AOCs and the people that are doing it through purely legislative fashions, or Stacey Abrams. Is that her name in Georgia?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, somebody like that, that's who you need to get behind now. Your Katie Porters, your people that are clearly well versed in what the issues we face at the moment are and how to go about getting them. It's not just everyone trying to start the next Lincoln's project and make a ton of money in the meantime, that is helpful to some extent, but it can become unhelpful and a distraction. And it enriches the people that are getting your clicks together. And they're not really giving that money to food banks and stuff. They're using that to pay themselves millions of dollars to be brilliant political consultants. You know, the people are getting paid millions to write left articles on the left. And look at me and look at my outrage. The whole thing has just become a machine at this point. That if you're not part of the machine, it's going to deliver you the same results it delivered in 2016 when everybody went along with it and nobody wanted to speak out. And I called up my colleagues and said, we should tell the truth about this guy. You know, screw the NDAs. We know who he really is. Let's tell people. And they're like, no, I want to work again, man. Like, I'm not going to do it. It ain't worth it. He's probably not going to win anyway. And then he did win and nobody worked because he was so bad at it. He shut down the country. Because he was so worried about himself. And that's my point with these other organizations. When people are worried about making money, you know, and what their competition is in making the next cool video, they forget about why they came, you know, and that's what happens to politicians. Joe Manchin forgot about the poor people in West Virginia that he represents. He's thinking about, I got a 2017 Maserati, and I think that means 2022, you know, is looking even sweeter. I should be in a Maybach. My head's too big for a Maserati. How does he fit that big old jar head in that thing anyway? You ever see that guy's head? He looks like a half deflated football or something. No Manchin.
Well, and I'm a guy that has a ginormous head. So, you know, I would have to make a comparison. Dude. But I'm saying I understand his pain. You know, it takes a lot of neck weight to hold this up. But, you know, yeah, man. Like, and I've brought this up before, but, you know, Lauren Boebert wasn't a well-off person before she got into Congress, you know. So if you have 20 other of these chaos agents going in where they're trying to right a few of their wrongs in their life, right? They're trying to build up their bank account or put their kids in a position so that they don't have to worry about money ever again. I'm saying the folks that are coming in are not only deplorable, they're also desperate because they've never had access to these kind of contacts before. You know, when you have privileged jobs like this, it opens all kinds of opportunities that are then sustainable once you're out of Congress. Like it's all a grift now. Like we've said, like the idea of working in government is not about service anymore. It's about taking away from the people because they know it's just getting paid into.
Right. And they're world famous now. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert are two of the most famous women in the United States. Whether you want to admit that to yourself or not, they're household names, and that is worth money. Right? You get booked because you get a lot of followers. These are people that no one had heard of a year and a half ago, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene was a QTuber, okay? Lauren Boebert's middle name is Opal, okay? She was born in Florida and worked at a McDonald's. I've worked at a McDonald's. I'm not shaming that. I'm just saying she barely got her GED. People with money saw that she had a future in Republican politics and they wanted to open up more mineral drilling in Colorado. So they found her. She was an actress, dude. She was on websites appearing as an actress. She owned Shooters, you know, a stupid like Hooters ripoff where we'll have guns and titties, you know, like it's the dumbest shit in the world. Right. And they're like, that person will fit this climate perfectly. And then she goes there and all of a sudden she's got tons of money and she's paying off back debt and using campaign funds for her own stuff. And they're famous. And you can't discount the narcissism factor here. Clearly Manchin gets off on it. Kristen Sinema is a goddamn psychopath. You know, she likes it more than anyone else. And they just found out she was one of the reasons she was installed. And a group that doesn't give money to anybody else gave money to her because they want her to kill this bill, which is basically anti-Ponzi schemes. You know, these viral marketing things where you sell Mary Kay or whatever cosmetics. And if I sign you up, then you're going to get money. It's a Ponzi scheme. You know, if you're in on the top of it, you'll make money and everybody else suffers. And it should be regulated. And there's a bill to sort of crack down on it. And they want her to kill the bill. So they gave her a bunch of money. And guess what she's going to do? You know, just like she did for the, you know, pharma and big, you know, hedge funds and stuff that, you know, pay her to go to vineyards, you know, so you're getting tons of money, you're getting fame, you have the power, right? Because fame will screw you up if you're just like a comedian and get famous or a singer. You know, I've worked around famous people my entire adult life. Okay. Since I was, a kid myself, since I was younger, 22 years old, I was doing shows with, Aretha Franklin and Tony Bennett, guys that were really, and girls that were really famous, and then I saw grunge guys become famous. Somebody like Dave Grohl is the same dude now that he was before he was famous, because he was a good guy who had a great heart and he didn't change. He enjoyed it with gratitude. Right. But I've seen a million other acts come up when I was doing the VMAs. I did that for 20 years. I would see these people come in and just act like complete tools. They'd been famous for 5 minutes. They didn't understand yet that you don't make any money in the beginning in the music industry. It's about hang on to album 3. This is back when people even still sold albums. Now you only make money playing live, but unless you're a couple of people. But they didn't even realize, like, oh, you think you're really famous now, but you don't have the part of the career that you get to keep until you really prove it. But they'd already started like buying into the head trip, and being assholes, and they'd be out of the industry so quickly. And I could name 20 acts like that right now. And you'd be like, oh yeah, I remember them. You know what I mean? Like, but you just don't. And they thought they were huge at the time. This is the next big thing. You're always the next big thing until are the big thing. So my point is, it'll screw up anybody's head, right? Okay. Like Bill Murray said, like, when you're famous, you get to be an asshole for a year, and that's your excuse for that, and the rest is on you, essentially. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and so imagine these women, these people that came from, meth lick Arkansas or wherever, Georgia, you know what I mean? Like Marjorie Taylor Greene was running a gym, like cheating on her husband with other weightlifters, and shooting up steroids or something in the back, and then she becomes a QTuber. They find her and make her the candidate against this Democrat that they ran out of Georgia. And now she's visiting the DC jail, as she did last night. And putting out these Twitter threads saying, like, she'll never forget the screams of the persecuted political prisoners. She acted like she was visiting a German POW camp, 1943 or something. It was insane.
What the hell are we doing too? That the best, sentence we can get for somebody who went into the Capitol was 2 months long. Like, that's the most extensive punishment we've handed out. Like, we know it's a slanted deal, and it's a rigged game when it comes to our justice system, but these are domestic terrorists. Like, let's stop, trying to pretend like these guys were, just trying to go on tours. They're domestic terrorists, and they should be in Guantanamo Bay. If it was up to me, like, I don't know. It depends on the shade of skin color that we're dealing with. Depending on that defines how the media is going to carry the narrative.
Yeah, obviously, if those people were Muslim or African American, they wouldn't have made it away from the Capitol that day, right? They would have been lucky to get locked up, because they would have been shot down and murdered. But like, they're white guys, and you have to go easy on them, right? Because that's the system is designed to protect white folks, right?
Wasn't Merrick Garland brought in to kick ass? I mean, isn't it about time for him to wake up?
People forget he was chosen because Obama knew the Republicans wouldn't object to him because he was conservative. He spoke at the Federalist Society. They were like, they surely won't have a problem with him. He's one of them. I'm giving them one of them. And they didn't take it because they were that emboldened at that point that McConnell's like, no, and now they got 3 picks, as we all know, Trump, Gorsuch and Comey, and, like, so they'll play dirty and we play nice and we get screwed. Merrick Garland I had a feeling like he was going to be the first person that like Biden would eventually have to replace, in his cabinet. I just felt from the beginning, like something feels off. And I have no expertise in this area. I'm just a person observing it. But I do understand we have a desperate need for justice in this country. We need to balance the scales. There's scales for a reason when you look at the symbol of justice, right? You need it. You need to like bend the arc back towards doing the right thing. And at this point, he hasn't even sent out an arrest warrant for Steve Bannon. Who's basically been on the lam for 12 days now. He defied Congress. I would be so terrified if I did something like that. You know, if I don't show up for jury duty, it weighs on my psyche. This guy's like, yeah, January 6th commission where a bunch of people attacked the Capitol and I was intimately involved in it with a corrupt criminal president and in the hotel room and there the whole weekend. Screw you. I don't got to tell you anything. And the attorney general, like, there's no recourse. He's just doing his podcast and putting Marjorie Taylor Greene on the air and spreading more, you know, it's like, how do you not feel they're in on it? How does Trump get away with all he gets away with? You know, he killed his executives in the 80s in a helicopter crash that was obviously a mob hit. Nobody investigates it. You know, his own pilot gets busted with a bunch of kilos of cocaine in Ohio. They move the case to his sister's district in Jersey, who's a federal judge. And the guy gets off with a slap on the wrist, gets out of Danbury in like a year and gets a condo in Trump Tower for being nice, for taking one for the boss. Do you know what I'm saying? You go to jail for the mob, you get a reward if you keep your mouth shut. Capiche? You know, like, and the guy got to go on and have a career selling cocaine in Trump Tower for the last 20 years. You know, Trump gets away with everything. He really does. I don't mean to bring it back to the guy, but you have to understand, like, Trump had a lot of sympathy in the Department of Justice, and Garland didn't go in and clean house. He left the people in positions who were like tapping reporters' phones and trying to bug like Adam Schiff's office and stuff and kids. You know, Garland left those people in there. As I said, he should have walked in day one, say, you know, if you were appointed or went along with any of the Trump policies, raise your hand, you know, and everyone who raised their hand, okay, go get a box out of the closet, put your pens in the box, get the hell out of here. You're fired. You know, like you had to right that ship, and we didn't. And, you know, in many ways it's too late because everyone's seen that these guys got away with it and they're going to do it again. They're not hiding. You know, I said after January 6th, people should have been running out, pulling those Trump stickers off of their pickup. In a healthy country, that would have been the one thing that you saw, that on January 7th, you wouldn't really see any more Trump signs. You wouldn't see all the bumper stickers because people would be ashamed of how far it went, you know, and how bad it got. You thought that most of these suburban guys would be like, yep, that was too much for me. Dude's name doesn't get to be on my truck anymore. But it didn't happen. You know, it didn't happen. He's more popular than ever. So, you know, you didn't have the infrastructure in place to deal with that. You know, you have, you know, the leader of the Senate, you know, the Democrat, Chuck Schumer, letting everybody go home for 2 weeks. And then they come back and then they get another 2-week break for Thanksgiving. Right. So nothing's going to get passed. Nothing's going to get done.
Well, and it's, you know, it just blows my mind too that, like, you know, I don't know.
Listen, the next committee hearing is when they come back. They come back for like a day or two, have one more hearing, and then they go on vacation again for 2 weeks. That's not the kind of justice we need at this moment. We needed somebody rounding everybody up by the scruff of their necks by the end of February and saying, this is who did it. This is who worked in the Capitol, who aided them. You know, Marjorie Taylor Greene had a "Let's Go Brandon" sign outside of her office on a big piece of paper where she has all her fan letters from MAGA morons that like write her, telling her she's doing a great job, right? Outside the office, which, Jimmy, I know you're not familiar with the area. I worked on Capitol Hill. Like, it's so crazy just to hang up stuff outside of your office anyway. It's such it's not your hospital window door. You know what I mean? It's not, it's the halls of Congress. You don't need to put all your personal crap on the outside of your office door, you know, put it in your room. But the fact that she did that, would just hang that thing and then have it stolen and complain about it, shows you they have no fear. Right? They're not worried. She went to visit the prisoners, right? Last night.
Louis Gohmert.
Right. Yeah. So she's not worried. You know, she wasn't worried that one of them was going to be like, hey, remember how you showed me? You know, like, she's not even scared because they have nothing to be afraid of. They got us on the ropes, Jimmy. They got Let's Go Brandon. They got Aaron Rodgers. You know, they have their army and it's been undeterred, and they may be freaks and they may be morons, but they have massive reaches. 400 million people download Joe Rogan's podcast, something insane like that. We're lucky to get 4,000 people hearing this, you know, and I'm doing well. And I'm not trying to tell you to do anything anyway, you know, but the fact that a guy like that has that kind of reach, shows you're dealing with something that you've never seen before. And I'll answer your question first. I know what the original question was, but you're dealing with something you've never seen before, Jimmy. And you have to change minds. Like, you're in the middle of it. You're in Indiana. You know a lot of people. You got to do your bros. Like, why do you feel that way? Why are you opposed to gay marriage? Why are you thinking that, you don't need to learn about critical race theory? Most white people don't know anything about the horrors of this country in the Jim Crow era, let alone slavery. Do I think what?
See, one of the things that has held back human progress, especially in this country, is that white people are too scared to learn anything that might negatively impact their perception of their ancestors and who they are. This stuff is too scary for white people to even hear, let alone absorb and apply. So I guess for me, on a ground level here in Indiana, how do I make it approachable for somebody to even hear what I have to say?
Look, what are people so scared of? They fucking watch horror movies and play video games,
right,
and collect guns, and are obsessed with violence and all this, the language, even the language of love is violent. I'm going to hit that. I'd tap that, like all this, so everything is this toxically masculine stuff. Then why can't you like man up and hear about what we did in this country? And most of the people that need to hear it aren't the people that did it. Right. Most of the folks in this country came here after, in the early 20th century is when most of these folks that are sort of MAGA, morons, and the guys that I'm talking about, these dudes, their granddads came here and laid bricks and stuff, and built things and worked hard. And it's sitting in the face of those guys. It was only through changing that we became this sort of beacon of hope that we were supposed to be in the world. Give us, you're hungry, you're tired, you're sick, you're poor. We're supposed to be living up to these ideals that everybody's welcome here if you want to work hard. So the best way to start talking about that is say, hey, you want to know who really built this place? It wasn't us. It was some people that we brought here and enslaved and never paid for their labor to this day, and did everything we could do to hold them down. And the people that we even stole the land from, we really screwed them, like we put them on reservations, the ones that we let live.
Yeah.
So you have to recognize that. We're about to celebrate Thanksgiving. The tribe that helped the Thanksgiving, the first pilgrims survive, regrets it to this day because they got screwed. They reacted with humanity, right? And how did the white man react? Well, I got to take this. I got to outsmart these guys and kill them. And steal their stuff. And people want to act like that never happens. There was on Tuesday, I watched Martha McCallan is her name, some hag on Fox News, right? A blonde with big titties that, had to do probably God knows what, with their old, what's his name? Guy's name?
Roger Ailes.
Right. Like you just look at this girl, like, God, I shudder to think what Roger put her through. And I'm not saying that because I think it's funny. I think it's fucking disgusting, and it was a big part of the business. Everybody knew that. Les Moonves, Matt Lauer, none of this shit was a secret in Hollywood. People just don't talk about it, So, but anyway, she got her money, right? She's getting the gig. So she was on there now and she's interviewing two people on Tuesday in Virginia, two like suburban, moms, right?
Right.
And the one lady, and they were talking about critical race theory. And the one lady, and they'll do this sometimes on Fox News where they don't see that they have a Democrat sitting in front of them. They kind of get, because there's so many people, like they pre-vet them so well to say what they mean to say. They say, here, you're going to go on and you're going to make this point, okay? And then we're going to cut back to Jean Pirro or whatever box wine lady is, who helped fund, by the way, January 6th. She gave a bunch of money to these organizations too. But anyway, so this Martha McCallan is sitting there interviewing this lady, and the lady goes, hey, I want them to tell the truth in schools. I don't like that they're just telling them like Christopher Columbus was some hero and they leave out the genocide and stuff, And Martha McCallan was like, what? I'm going to have to fact check that. I don't know that that's really true. And of course she knows it's true, but she doesn't, that's not the party line. You don't want that slipping out. Because you got a statue in your town of, the great Italian, who discovered, who never set foot on the mainland, who was a maniac, who did horrible things that if you just read a page or two of them, you're sick to your stomach.
Right.
But you don't get better unless you figure out what went down. A business that doesn't take a proper inventory is kidding itself about the value of its goods. And that's where we've come as a country. We're lying to ourselves about our self-worth. We're not a great country anymore. We're a deeply damaged country where every day I see on Twitter, people like, I would never visit the US again or right now, and I used to love coming there, and there's no way I would go there now. And we're not alone in this. England is going through the same thing. A lot of the sort of Western hemisphere is dealing with this rise in fascism, but it's happened before. It's happening now. And we got to do something about it while we can. Because while it seems funny that Joe Rogan, and Aaron Rodgers are spewing idiocy and lies, right, it's not really funny. Because, a couple steps down the road, that same rhetoric could be like, yeah, I really do believe insert whatever group of people here is the enemy. And we can't be strong again until we get them all out of the country. Right. We'll send them to camps. Like, we know where this goes. And they use the same trappings. Authoritarians always use this machismo. It's always this virile, tough guy leader, Franco and Mussolini and Trump, and Hitler. And these guys are all dweeby assholes in real life, which is part of the reason they get off on that. It's why Joe Rogan's a tough guy, because he's a little short guy. I'm a little short guy. You're a little short guy, right? Little short guys really aren't that tough. No, you know what I mean? You want to be and you get all jacked up. You're still fucking short. And you know that anybody over 6 foot can basically kick your ass no matter what you do. You know what I mean? Like, because they can pick you up. You're short. And it's on a fundamental level, guys who don't accept it feel humiliated by it. And you can always see those little toxic bros. I mean, New York is full of them. Go to Jersey Shore. It's all like 5'9", like Italian guys walking around all jacked up, and that's what Joe Rogan's like, this hyper masculine dude bro, which is fine if you're just talking to other dude bros. But if you're opening your mouth, about a vaccination thing and about like medicine, and nothing about what you're talking about, and you're not a doctor, right, and we can't get people to take a vaccine and put on a mask, so we're still dying of this stuff, and you're playing arenas while everyone else is dying, where us smaller comics don't get to make a living, or the clubs all have to show, vaccination cards at this stuff, so we don't have other flare-ups, and you're just playing arenas in places that don't even care. Right. That's just like, screw you. How much money do you need? You already have $80 million from Spotify. Like, how greedy are these fucking people that they're not just like, hey, maybe I should just shut the fuck up for a minute, go drive my Lamborghini and jerk off to like Men's Health magazine or whatever it is that somebody like Joe Rogan does, eat some bugs. You know what I mean? Like, what is wrong with these people?
Well, and it's frustrating for me because as somebody with disability, I was always kind of not picked on. I was never bullied extensively, but I was around bullies. I know what bullies look like. And that's what these guys have kind of become. They're roided out bullies. They're weak-minded, that only care about their safety in the end, when really, any bully that I've ever stood up to was never as tough as they perceived to the outside. And I get that these guys are intimidating, but at some point somebody's got to stand up to these bullies. I don't know. I know that's a generic thing to say, but that's part of the frustration for me, is that these guys are bullies and they have a bully mentality with everything they say.
It's about it's bro culture. I grew up in that, homophobic kind of just douchey white guys. I mean, it's why I'm not really in comedy clubs and stuff, because it's just, they're not beating down my door, and it's so much of that. And I'm just like, I did it for, a couple of years. You're on showcases and just like stupid misogynistic joke after the other. And you're just like, why is my like frequency in this room? Like, why is my consciousness being exposed to this ugliness, and why am I a part of this art form, sort of? And when I started getting a bit of a following, I'd feel bad because I'd say, hey, I'm going to be at Caroline's Monday night, beginner's night. And, 12, 15 people would show up because they wanted to hear me talk about the political stuff, you know.
Right.
And the guy hated me who ran the show, so he'd put me on, you know, towards the end, and it's 18 comics. You know? So my people are sitting here listening to like the 15th comic, you know, talk, you know, do a dick joke or something, which is part of how it all works out. But it, you know, it's just so, you know, or the macho stuff. You know, there's a lot of New York comics that it's just make fun of the audience member. You know, what is this? You guys here for a NAMBLA convention? You know, it's that
Right.
Is this a Tinder date, or, you know, or whatever? What's the gay, you know, like Grinder? You guys on a Grinder date? Like you hear
Right.
that a lot. You know, it's just that kind of locker room. Anytime it goes to that sex stuff, it's just like, ugh. If it's not part of a joke, you know, if it's not a written kind of thing and it's just a hectoring. But my point is, you know, those guys are always there. They're always deeply insecure. You know, anybody who's super misogynistic has issues, and he's afraid of women, and he's afraid of intimacy. You know what I mean? He's attracted to his mom or whatever. You know, there's all kinds of creepy, weird shit that people get into and don't, you know, heal themselves. But it's, you know, Trump was a bully. People would ask me like, why, how come he doesn't sue you? Or aren't you scared? No, man, he's a bully. I saw the guy. He's the most terrified little man you're ever going to meet, you know? And so is his son. His sons are like, they're like Freudian case studies in just like weird, edible, like, you know, Don Jr. hated his father, right? He hated his father because he knew what his dad did to his mom. And Don bonded with his Czechoslovakian grandparents. Okay. His mom was Ivana Trump, you know, and that's who he bonded with. He hated his dad, even through after college. And he moved out to Aspen in the Rockies, and he was like a ski bum, like bartender, cokehead, you know, he partied, but then he became his dad, right? Then once he sort of like realized he couldn't outrun it, he became the guy. He became this monster sort of towards women, and, you know, this fake machismo puffing his chest out little punk, right? Shooting animals and, you know, all this kind of stuff, like sort of trying to like reach like what his father thought was like who he should be as a man, and that he'd never, you know, measure up and stuff because his dad would punch him in the face for not wearing a suit. And, you know, Trump is an awful person. Like, he shouldn't have been raising kids. He was a maniac since he was a kid, right? So you can imagine how he treats his like namesake son. Like, they hate each other, but he becomes him, you know. And that's what happens. You know, that's what happens with sort of abusers. You don't heal and examine yourself. You become these things you don't want to be, right? You know, that show Ted Lasso, I finally saw some. You would like that, Jimmy. Did you watch it?
I don't have Apple Plus. It's the only streaming thing I don't have. I'm gonna have to get a month and try it out.
Yeah, you would like that show. But anyway, there's a soccer player who's like really arrogant and kind of a jerk. And then they show like his father, you know, being that way to him and stuff. And that's sort of what happens. It's like, if we don't heal from things, we pass it on. And the goal is to be as sensitive as you can, as we always say, to every living creature. You know, I picked up a yoga mat that's been out on the deck today, and I knew better, because whenever you leave something for a long time in the country, like bugs will go live under it, right? Things will like find a home there, especially when it starts to get cold. And I lifted up this yoga mat, and there was a spider, you know, who had his little nest. He had laid eggs, and he had all this nest all tightly, you know, and I disturbed that. I put it back right away and tried to make sure like he had enough space under there, you know, but it's bummed me out all afternoon, you know, because I sort of messed with something, and I messed with the natural order of life. You know, this spider was keeping its babies warm. You know, he had them in this protected place that, because I'd left the thing there for a couple months undisturbed, he had a right to presume that a caring universe was supporting him, you know, and giving him this safe place where he wouldn't get rained on in the middle of the night and stuff. And then I sort of like, in a moment of unconsciousness, because I knew you should be careful in moving that, but it's cold out and maybe the bugs are gone and you can't leave it there forever. And so I disturbed it. And my point is, had I been just a little more sensitive or listened a little deeper to my intuition in the moment, I would have prevented that, you know. And to me, life is about developing your awareness and your sensitivity to all the layers of life, to all the vibrations, because everything's made out of vibrations, Jimmy. That's what atoms, that's what all this, those rocks are just vibrating atoms behind me. They've been formed into a fireplace, but we're all sort of made out of like ultimately the same material. And anything that's breathing and animated and has eyes and like emotions and stuff, which is any sentient being, and it's trees. Trees scream when you cut them down. They communicate through their roots with other trees and stuff. There's a lot of power and beauty in nature, and we ignore it. And my point is, the more you become attuned to it, the more aware you'll become. And when you gain awareness, you gain the thing that can heal the world, right? We can't think our way out of this now, Jimmy. We have to go beyond our minds. That's what the solution is really going to be. Everybody becoming so sort of present and aware that they find their own sort of inner goodness and reject these labels and this dogma that they've sort of been hoodwinked into believing, right? And you think, well, that's never going to happen because these guys are morons, right? And I get it. I think that too. 90% of this podcast is about me just ranting on these idiots and how they've been brainwashed. But at the end of the day, they're human beings. They're alive, sentient beings. And they have that sort of kernel of truth within them, right? Every human does. It's like Jesus was like, forgive them, like, Father, they know not what they did or what they do or whatever. Obviously, I don't know anything about the Bible, right? But he said that, right? Basically, he was forgiving the people that were crucifying him because he knew they were doing it out of ignorance. And that's what a lot of this stuff is. People are acting out of ignorance because they've forgotten how to go within themselves. And when you go deep within yourself, you see yourself in other things. And when you start seeing yourself in other things, then you see what truth is. And truth is just light. Truth is love. It's just recognizing yourself and everyone you meet. Try doing that. And that's where you'll find the solutions. As I say, you can't think your way out of this. You can't talk your way out of this. We're all going to keep trying, but ultimately the answer will come from us coming together in presence, right? And that's what happens at shows. You asked how we could change this because sports, bring us together. And those great moments in sports are metaphors. Just like a great moment, at a concert where the lights are off and everybody's listening to Springsteen, rock out for the third hour, or whoever it is, right? And no one's a Republican and a Democrat. Everyone's just like grasping a little bit of freedom and rock and roll and good time and in the moment and sweating together and singing together, and crying together and laughing together. And that's what brings us together. So you have to cultivate that. If you have a desire to be a part of the solution, find what that thing is. Find out where you can get everybody to get a little bit of that spirit and that feeling. You got to find your own magic, and then you got to share it with the world. And that's how you change the place, Jimmy.
Well, and Noel, for folks that listen to my podcast, JBK on Air, my second interview on that show was with my dad. It was done a few years before, it had already been recorded, but he had talked about how when he played music, his favorite thing was communicating with the audience. They're not looking at their phone. They're not watching TV. They're paying attention to the people that are in front of them at their table that are playing the music. And then it kind of creates a feedback loop, right? And I've just tried to carry that, in everything that I do to try to, I'm talking about empathy, essentially. You're tapping into the feelings of other people around you. But I learned that from my dad, when he would play music, that all you're trying to do is communicate back, and hopefully they give you some kind of signal that they're listening. And somehow we're going to have to raise the frequency of this country. And I think if we can allow ourselves to not be ignorant to the stupidity that we've seen and actually talk to them, then we have a chance.
Yeah.
It's gonna take a lot of patience on our part. We've already displayed a lot, but it's gonna take more. That's my point.
Yeah, well, and it's also, it's why we can't divide the healing. Part of the problem we're facing now is that like life can't come back online, essentially, because people are exploiting the differences for shameless political gain. Fox News is doing it to make money. So you get people like, I'm not getting vaccinated. And then they keep giving other people the disease. What I mean? So we don't get everybody back at a Jimmy Buffett concert, or whatever it is that like where people kind of come together and realize, oh, you know what? I don't hate that person that much. I did go to high school with them. I do have something in common with them. Part of the problem with all this is like, it's easy to be an enemy online, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to say like, fuck all to anybody. Sorry to curse, right? When you know that they're just, you can block them and whatever, it's a lot harder to do that face to face, right? You just, the human, the healthy, normal human doesn't really want to pick fights and have conflict in every interaction, but now people are like so amped up by this stuff that they're seeking it out, right? They're going out without a mask and they got this whole thing in their head, what they're going to do when someone asks them to put on a mask, and it's violent. It's crazy, right? Because you're sort of activating a character defect that's already in somebody. There's in sobriety, like they say, your slip happens before you take the first drink, right? You already know it's coming because there's this unrest in you. And once that sort of like germinates, you want to act out upon it. You want to follow it through. And that's a lot of what we're seeing with the anti-vaxxers and people not wearing masks, is they're just following through on this sort of like storm that's been lit inside them. I sort of have to do something to validate all this anger and stuff. And, it's a complicated psychological phenomena that I don't think the world has ever really seen before. We're really witnessing something that's, amazing. And we didn't even get into the QAnon people this week that showed up at the Plaza in Dallas.
Oh, yeah.
And hundreds and hundreds of people, right? We're not talking 24. We're talking, 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 people thought JFK Jr. was coming back, like it's insane, it's insane. But so my point is, it shows you how far sort of it has gone, and how activated these people are, and how you really want to figure out a way to start dealing with it and treating it in some kind of holistic way. Because, think of the United States as a classroom, like it's in our classroom, right? We can't just transfer these kids out to another school because they're being disruptive. We're stuck with them. We're stuck with like trying to deal with them. We don't have to be stuck with the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Boberts and all these people. We need to try and vote them out if you can. I mean, North Carolina just passed the most draconian, they just 78% of the state basically gets a Republican vote now. Okay. Yeah, no, it's just insane. So it'll be challenged, but if things like that go through, it probably doesn't even matter that much. The Republican minority is going to be in power for a long time. But if you do get the opportunity to vote them out, you better do it. And then you better get to changing the minds of the people there in your community. Every little bit helps. Every little act of kindness will undo, the sort of darkness that's fallen upon us as a nation.
Well, and something that you brought up, and I totally agree, anybody in opposition to progress is at some point against love, like an opposition to progress is an opposition to love, so I get that people are set in their ways and that some people are going to be offset by changes that are coming. But it's bigger than us. It's bigger than an individual job or a community that might have a little bit of a change. Like we need to save this planet, and big changes need to happen on a community level. You were talking about politics. It can't just happen in New York or Indiana. It needs to happen throughout the country. So then we can see incremental changes, from time to time.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. All right, folks. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it for this week. Episode 36 of the Noel Casler podcast. Take care of yourselves. Come out to see me if you're listening. Norwalk, November 28th. Boston City Winery, December 27th, the eve of Christmas Eve. Noel is going to be in the house, and I'll be on January 26th. I'll be at Iridium in New York City. Until then, you can find me on Twitter at noelcasler.com. You know where to find Jimmy, but he's going to tell you right now.
jbkonair.com. Also JBK on air for Twitter and Instagram.
There you go. So check us out. Thanks for listening. We love you guys. Stay safe. About to lose an hour of daylight this week. Oh, yeah. So you're going to hear this on a day that's going to be a little darker, but don't worry. Spring is coming soon. It's not really. I just figured that was a good way to end. All right. It's a long, dark winter, folks, but keep listening. We'll keep you warm. Peace.